My name is Rhonda Anthony. I'm 29 years old, and I used to believe that silence meant surrender. Now I know. It can mean power. It was a Monday evening, 5 days before Thanksgiving. I was unloading groceries when my phone buzzed. Dad's name lit up the screen, followed by a voicemail. The tone of his voice was so formal, it could have been read in a boardroom. Rhonda, your mother and I talked. We think it's best if you don't come this year. It's too tense. We've decided to cut you off from the holiday. Please respect our decision. I stood in the kitchen, the refrigerator door still open, cold air brushing my arm. It wasn't the first time my parents had turned family into punishment, but this time, something shifted. Tense wasn't about conflict. It was their code word for disobedience. 2 weeks earlier, I'd stopped nodding when Mom made those little jabs about my career, how graphic design wasn't real work. I'd reminded her that she lived in a house she didn't pay for and that I was the one keeping their floundering shop alive behind the scenes. Dad didn't like that. At dinner last month, he joked that I'd never keep a man because I'm too opinionated. And I replied, quietly but firmly, maybe men who prefer silence aren't worth keeping. The table went cold. That was the night I realized how fragile their version of peace really was. They wanted control, obedient smiles, quiet compliance. So when the voicemail arrived, it wasn't punishment. It was confirmation. They were done pretending. I didn't call back. I didn't beg. I just stared at my reflection in the oven door and whispered, "Understood. Thanks." That night, I texted Eli, my boyfriend. He was out of town visiting his sister. I told him what happened. He replied almost instantly, "Do you want me to drive back?" "No," I typed. "Just stay with your family. I'll handle it." Eli knew what handle it meant. For years, I'd quietly run every system that kept my parents' store functioning: bookkeeping, payroll, tax software, online sales. I rebuilt it from scratch after they nearly lost the business to IRS penalties. They'd called me their tech girl, but in truth, I was their safety net. So that night, I logged into every system: banking, payroll, vendor accounts, and removed my name. I transferred the logins to their shared email, packed every document into one final folder, and sent it to them with no note attached. No explanation, no drama, just data. Then I logged out. And for the first time in years, I slept without my phone beside me. When I woke up the next morning, there were no messages, no missed calls, no apologies, just silence. By Tuesday afternoon, I checked my phone again. Still nothing. That's when it hit me. They really thought I'd crawl back. My parents had always been addicted to performance. Thanksgiving wasn't a tradition. It was their stage. Matching aprons, glossy smiles, the illusion of a perfect family. Behind the smiles, rot. The kind you breathe for so long you start to think it's air. Every year, I'd do the behind-the-scenes labor, design the invitations, manage the orders, even handle payments to the caterer while they took the credit. This year, they wanted me invisible. Fine. I'd show them what that really looked like. That evening, Eli called again. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said, slicing vegetables with slow, steady motions. "Are you sure?" I paused, staring at the cutting board. "They wanted me gone, Eli. I'm just giving them what they asked for." There was a pause, then a soft exhale. "You sound calm, too calm." I smiled faintly. Maybe calm is what comes after the storm. We stayed on the phone for an hour, talking about anything but my parents. His sister's baby, his dog, the new client pitch. For the first time, life outside my family felt real. When we hung up, I lit a candle and poured myself a glass of wine. The voicemail played in my head again, word for word, until it almost sounded funny. "Please respect our decision." Respect, a word they only used when demanding submission. By midnight, I deleted the voicemail. If they wanted distance, they'd get it. Not an argument, not a cry for attention, just quiet. Wednesday morning, I went to work like nothing happened, but I caught myself glancing at my phone every few hours, expecting the first ripple of panic. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't. They weren't just cutting me off from Thanksgiving. They were cutting themselves off from the person who kept their empire from collapsing. By noon, I checked the shop's back-end system one last time. I saw the first warning flag: overdue invoices, payroll batch pending, tax software inactive. I closed the browser. Whatever came next wasn't my responsibility anymore. That evening, Eli texted, "Dinner tomorrow? Or are you hiding from the world?" "Both," I wrote back, "but dinner sounds good." He replied with a winking emoji and said he'd bring dessert. I didn't know it yet, but while I was laughing with him over takeout the next night, my parents would be leaving the first of 84 voicemails. When people talk about revenge, they picture confrontation, shouting, slammed doors, broken plates. Mine was quieter. No yelling, no drama, just the absence of me. The absence of my labor, the absence of my obedience. And in that silence, I started to feel something new, peace. I roasted a small chicken, opened another bottle of wine, and put my phone on Do Not Disturb. The candle flickered as I whispered to the empty room. They wanted a life without me. I took a sip of wine, smiled faintly, and added, "Let's see how that works out." The first call came early Thursday morning. Dad, then Mom, then both. At first, I ignored them because I thought they were just trying to guilt me into talking. By noon, there were 12 missed calls. By Friday morning, there were 37. By Saturday night, 84. Each voicemail sounded more frantic than the last. "Rhonda, we just need you to walk us through payroll. It's due this week." "Honey, please, you're overreacting." "We can't get into the sales system. The screen says it's locked." Their voices blended into one long stream of noise. I stopped listening after the 10th one. Not out of cruelty, just exhaustion. For years, I'd been the quiet fixer, the one who patched their mistakes while they complained about how difficult I was. Now, without me, the seams were coming undone. Friday night, I had dinner with Eli. He noticed I was distracted, scrolling through my phone, the missed call counter blinking like a warning light. "You haven't blocked them?" he asked. "I don't need to," I said, cutting into my pasta. "They'll burn themselves out eventually." Eli studied me for a moment. "Are you sure you're not just waiting for them to say sorry?" That question sat heavy. I wanted to say no, that I'd finally stopped hoping for apologies. But I couldn't lie. Some small, foolish part of me still expected a call that began with, "We're sorry." Instead, Saturday morning brought this. "Rhonda, we don't know how to access anything. You're blowing this out of proportion. We need you to help file the quarterly taxes. Your father's upset. You're putting us in a terrible position. Can't you just do this one last time?" One last time. That phrase haunted me, because there had already been 100 last times. The last time I bailed them out of late fees. The last time I stayed up till 3 a.m. rebuilding their website. The last time I swallowed an insult to keep the peace. So this time my answer was silence. Saturday evening, I lit candles and played music while I cooked. The phone buzzed across the counter, screen lighting up over and over again. Mom, Dad, Mom again. I didn't even flinch. It was like watching someone else's crisis through a glass wall. That night, Eli came over with takeout. We sat on the couch, the phone still buzzing in the background. "You're really not going to pick up?" he asked gently. "No. They sound desperate." "They're not desperate for me," I said. "They're desperate for what I do for them." Eli nodded slowly, like he finally understood. I leaned back, exhaling, the faint rhythm of missed call alerts echoing through the living room like a metronome. By Sunday morning, I woke to 29 new calls. When I checked the messages, my mother's voice cracked between sobs. "Rhonda, please, the card reader isn't syncing. We can't run payments. You know we're not good with this tech stuff. You're the only one who understands how it all works." And then she said the line that froze me in place. "We didn't mean to cut you off. We just needed some space." Space. They said it like it was therapy, like they hadn't deliberately erased me from the holiday, from the family table. I sat at my kitchen counter, listening to her voice shake, and realized she still didn't understand what she'd done. There was no apology, just manipulation dressed as vulnerability. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted access. By Monday, the panic had turned corporate. Emails started pouring in from the shop account, half-coherent, urgent. Subject lines like, "Help, payroll error, and tax file blocked." I didn't reply to a single one. Instead, I watched the messages pile up while sipping coffee. Every unread subject line was a small act of rebellion. That afternoon, Dad's tone shifted. He wasn't begging anymore. He was angry. "Rhonda, this is unacceptable. You're sabotaging your own family." I almost laughed. How easily they flipped the narrative from "we cut you off" to "you abandoned us." The silence was working. For the first time, they were forced to face the chaos they'd created without blaming me for fixing it too slowly. That night, Eli came over again. He watched me pour wine, eyes narrowing in concern. "You look weirdly calm." "I'm calm." He hesitated. "What if this never ends?" I smiled faintly. "It already has. They just don't know it yet." We ate dinner on the balcony. The air was cool, quiet, the city humming below us. I could still feel the faint buzz of my phone from inside the apartment. I didn't check it, not once. By Tuesday afternoon, things got ugly. Dad's voicemail had gone from panicked to furious. "Why are you doing this to us? You've made your point. Families don't treat each other this way." The irony was so sharp, it almost made me laugh. Because families also don't leave 1-minute voicemails disowning their own daughter before Thanksgiving. That night, I deleted every message, one by one. The counter dropped from 84 to 0. And for the first time in years, my phone was quiet. I stood by the window, city lights flickering against the glass, and whispered, "They wanted peace. They've got it." Then, as if on cue, the phone buzzed once more, a call from a blocked number. I didn't answer, but I saved the voicemail, because I had a feeling this story wasn't over yet. By Wednesday morning, I thought maybe the worst was over. The calls had slowed, the voicemails stopped. It was the kind of quiet that could almost fool you into thinking things had settled. Almost. I was halfway through my coffee when someone knocked on my door. 3 soft knocks, then silence. I froze. No text, no heads up, just that sound. The same rhythm my mom used when she used to come into my room uninvited. I walked slowly to the window beside the door and peered out through the curtain. It was her. Mom, standing on my porch in her cream coat, clutching her phone like a weapon she didn't know how to use. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe just less certain. Her eyes darted toward the windows, scanning for movement. Then she knocked again, lips pressed tight, jaw trembling with some mix of pride and desperation. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't open the door. I just watched her. After a few minutes, she pulled her coat tighter and walked back to her car. A moment later, the phone buzzed. "Rhonda, I came by because I thought maybe face-to-face would help. I know things got out of hand. We didn't mean to hurt you. You're still our daughter. And this business stuff, it's gotten out of control. Please come talk to us." Still no apology. Still that same deflection. "We didn't mean to hurt you." As if cutting me out was an accident. As if humiliation could be excused as family tension. I replayed her words once, then deleted the message. That afternoon, Eli stopped by after work. He saw the drawn curtains, the untouched coffee mug, and asked quietly, "She came, didn't she?" I nodded. "What did she say?" "Nothing new, just a longer version of your overreacting." Eli sighed, running his hand through his hair. "Do you want me to stay tonight?" I shook my head. "No, I'm fine, really." He studied me for a moment before replying. "You say fine a lot when you're falling apart." I smiled weakly. Then it's a good thing I stopped falling. He didn't push further. He just kissed my forehead, told me he'd call later, and left. When the door closed, the silence wrapped around me again. I used to hate silence. Now, it felt like armor. Thursday morning, I got a call from my brother, Caleb. We hadn't spoken in weeks, not since I stopped answering the family group chat. "Hey," he said, voice cautious. "I don't want to get involved, but I thought you should know something." My stomach tightened. "What's going on?" "Mom and Dad are talking about selling the car." I frowned. "The one I bought from them?" "Yeah, they're saying you never finish paying, that you owe them." I nearly dropped the phone. "That's ridiculous, Caleb. I wired the full amount months ago. They handled the title transfer." He sighed, his voice low. "I know, Rhonda. I told them that. But they're saying it's still registered under Dad's name. They're calling it leverage." Leverage. That word hit harder than any insult could. I took a breath, steadying my voice. "Thanks for telling me." "I'm sorry. I really don't want to be in the middle of this." "I know. You don't have to be." When we hung up, I stared at the blank wall for a long time. My parents weren't just desperate anymore. They were retaliating. That night, Eli came over with groceries. He tried to keep things light, talking about work, his nephew's birthday, but he could tell my mind was elsewhere. Finally, he asked, "What did they do now?" I told him. About the car, the title, the lie. He set the grocery bag down a little too hard. "Rhonda, that's theft." "They'll call it a misunderstanding," I said quietly. He stepped closer. "Do you want me to call them? Maybe they'll back off if—" "No." I looked up, meeting his eyes. "They'd twist it. They'd say I sent you to threaten them." He exhaled sharply, frustrated but understanding. "So what now?" I looked out the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. I'm done fighting for explanations. I'll let their actions speak for themselves. Later that night, I sat on the couch scrolling through old photos on my phone. Birthdays, business events, holidays. Every image looked like a lie now. Smiles arranged for the camera, hands on shoulders that carried years of resentment. I deleted most of them, not out of anger, but out of clarity. You can't heal in the same room where you were hurt, and you can't find peace in pictures built on control. By midnight, I poured myself tea and looked around my apartment. It was quiet, small, imperfect, and entirely mine. That realization hit deeper than I expected. They could keep the car, the business, the facade, but they couldn't control the peace I'd built here. I didn't know yet, but that small act of stillness, of not reacting, was about to change everything. Because silence doesn't just protect you. It exposes those who depend on your compliance. And the next person to notice would be the one person my parents truly feared, my grandfather. Friday morning, the sky was overcast, the kind of gray that matched my mood. I hadn't planned on involving Grandpa. He hated family drama, always said, adults should solve their own messes. But this wasn't a mess anymore. It was manipulation. So I drove to his house, an old farmhouse on the edge of town with creaky porch steps and the smell of black coffee seeping from every window. He opened the door before I even knocked. His expression was calm, but there was something sharper behind his eyes. "Morning, kiddo," he said, stepping aside. "Coffee's hot." Inside, the same familiar clutter, newspapers, old tools, and a half-finished crossword on the table. I didn't even know where to start. "I didn't want to bother you," I said quietly, "but they've crossed a line." He motioned for me to sit. "Tell me everything." And I did. The Thanksgiving voicemail, the 84 missed calls, the payroll disaster, the lies about the car. Every detail spilled out of me, my voice breaking only once, when I said they'd shown up at my door. Grandpa didn't interrupt. He just nodded slowly, hands clasped over his coffee mug. When I finished, he sat back and exhaled through his nose. "I thought they'd grow out of it," he muttered. "Guess I was wrong." Then, without another word, he stood up and disappeared into his study. When he returned, he was holding a thick manila folder and his phone. He flipped open the folder, revealed documents with my parents' names on them, shop lease agreements, property deeds, financial notes. "Your folks have been running that business out of my building for years," he said. "Rent-free for the last 2. I blinked. "Rent-free?" He nodded. "I gave them rope. Looks like they've been using it to hang everyone else." Then he did something I'll never forget. He dialed his lawyer, his real lawyer, not a family friend, and spoke in that steady, no-nonsense tone that made everyone in town respect him. "2 things," he said. "I want a demand letter drafted to transfer the car title to my granddaughter immediately, and put a hold on the Anthony shop lease until further notice." There was a pause, then a faint chuckle. "Yeah, you heard me right. Effective today." When he hung up, he looked at me and said, "They've had too much rope. Time they felt the drop." I didn't say anything. I just felt something shift inside me, a strange mix of relief and sorrow. He poured me another cup of coffee. "They're coming here tomorrow at noon. I told them it's about the lease renewal. You should be here." I hesitated. "Do you think that's a good idea?" He smiled faintly. "I think it's time you stop letting them write the story." Saturday noon came faster than I expected. I arrived early, heart pounding, the house smelling of fresh brewed coffee and old wood polish. When their car pulled into the driveway, I felt my chest tighten. Mom stepped out first, her hair perfectly done, even though her eyes looked tired. Dad followed, adjusting his jacket like he was heading into a meeting. They didn't expect to see me, sitting at the table beside Grandpa. "Rhonda?" Mom's voice cracked slightly. "What are you doing here?" "Lease meeting," Grandpa said flatly. "Sit down." They obeyed, glancing nervously at each other. Grandpa opened the manila folder and slid 2 documents across the table. The first was a formal demand for the immediate transfer of the car title to my name. The second, a notice of lease freeze for the shop until the title was delivered. Dad's face went pale. "What is this?" "It's called accountability," Grandpa said. "You used my property, my name, and my money to exploit my granddaughter. That stops now." Mom's eyes darted between us, her voice trembling. "We didn't exploit her. She's overreacting, twisting everything." "Enough," Grandpa snapped. The single word hit like a gavel. He leaned forward. "You cut her off. You humiliated her. And when you realized she was the only reason your business stayed afloat, you tried to manipulate her back. That ends today." The room fell silent. I could hear the clock ticking in the corner, slow and merciless. Then Grandpa turned to me. "Do you want to say anything?" I swallowed hard, meeting my parents' eyes. "I'm not here to rebuild a family," I said. "I'm here to get what I paid for." For once, they had nothing to say, not a single excuse. 2 hours later, I stood in line at the DMV with the signed car title in my hands. It felt unreal, like holding a small symbol of freedom that had been long overdue. When I walked out with the new registration and fresh plates, I texted Grandpa a photo. He replied with a simple thumbs up emoji. That night, I drove the car for the first time, truly knowing it was mine. The road stretched out ahead, quiet and endless. For once, there was no guilt in the rearview mirror. But peace never lasts long when people like my parents realize they've lost control. Because 2 days later, my phone rang again. Caleb's name flashed on the screen. When I answered, his voice was tense. "Rhonda, they're telling people you blackmailed Grandpa." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, staring at the empty road ahead. Of course they were. Of course they couldn't let go. I didn't say a word, just listened. "They're saying the car wasn't a sale, that it was a loan, that you took advantage of him." My chest went cold, not from shock, but from recognition. This was their final play, rewrite the story before it hardened into truth. I pulled the car over, parked on the shoulder, and whispered to myself, they wanted to see what life was like without me. I looked at the phone, Caleb's worried voice fading through the speaker. "Well," I said softly, "they're about to find out." By Monday morning, the rumors had spread faster than wildfire. 2 cousins texted me vague, "Are you okay?" messages. An aunt called to say she hated being in the middle, and my brother sent a quiet apology. "They're telling everyone you manipulated Grandpa. I tried to correct them, but Mom's been calling everyone before I can." I just stared at the screen, expressionless. Because this was exactly what my parents always did. Whenever they lost control, they rewrote the story and cast themselves as victims. It used to work, but not anymore. I opened my laptop and pulled up the receipts, the wire transfer for the car, the time-stamped confirmation, even the insurance documents with my signature. I saved them all in a single folder labeled Proof, and then I did nothing. I didn't send them to anyone. I didn't post them. I didn't defend myself. I simply waited. Because silence, once again, would speak louder than any explanation ever could. That evening, Eli came over with takeout. He saw the tension in my jaw before I even spoke. "Let me guess," he said softly, setting the bags down. "Damage control mode?" I nodded. "They're saying I blackmailed Grandpa, that I manipulated him into freezing their lease." Eli frowned. "You have proof. Why not just shut it down?" "Because they don't want the truth," I said quietly. "They want attention. They thrive on chaos. If I feed it, I become the villain they need." He studied me for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You're handling this better than I would." "I'm not handling it," I said. "I'm outgrowing it." We ate dinner in silence, and for the first time, that silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like peace. 2 days later, Grandpa called. "Your parents came by," he said in that gravelly voice that could calm a storm. My pulse quickened. "What did they say?" "They tried to guilt me," he replied. "Said you were emotional, that I'd only heard one side." I braced myself, but then he chuckled. "I told them if they push this, I'll sell the shop building myself. And if they want to keep pushing, I'll sign the house over to you." I froze. "Grandpa." He cut me off. "No more chances. They've been bailed out enough times. Let them live in the mess they made." I didn't know what to say. Gratitude and grief tangled in my chest. For years, I thought silence made me powerless. But now, with Grandpa's calm authority beside me, I realized silence was the language of strength. The next morning, an email arrived from my parents' joint business account. The subject line read, "Resolution Agreement." I opened it slowly. Inside was a short, sterile message. "We won't dispute the car transfer if you promise not to tarnish the family image." No apology, no accountability, just another transaction disguised as peace. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Grandpa instead. A few minutes later, he texted me back. No words, just a photo. It was a scanned copy of the shop lease. My parents' names were blacked out. Underneath was a blank line. The caption said, "They want war, let them have silence instead." That night, I went for a long drive in the car they said wasn't mine. The streets were empty, moonlight glinting off the hood. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. Every turn felt lighter, every mile quieter. When I finally parked by the lake, I sat there for a while, listening to the stillness. Eli called, asking if I was okay. "I'm good," I said softly. "Really good." "You sound like you mean it." "I do." He paused, then said, "So what now?" I smiled faintly. "Now?" I let the silence do what it does best, reveal the truth. A week later, word reached me through Caleb that Grandpa had officially ended their shop lease. He gave them 60 days to clear out. Mom called one last time. I let it go to voicemail. "Rhonda, please, this has gone too far. We're family. We can work this out. Just talk to us." Her voice cracked halfway through, but still, not a single "I'm sorry." just desperation dressed as affection. I deleted it without listening twice. Months passed. I moved into a small studio downtown, started freelancing full-time, and for the first time, every dollar I earned was mine. Eli helped me paint the walls. Grandpa visited once a week with groceries and quiet pride. The holidays came and went. No invitations, no drama, just peace. Sometimes I still think about that first voicemail, the one that started it all. 5 seconds of cold dismissal that turned into freedom. They said, "We're cutting you off." What they didn't realize was they just set me free. Because silence isn't empty. It's full of the answers you stop waiting for.